Hi guys, welcome. My name is David, this is Raj and Jordan, and we are the Centurion group, and today we are presenting Animus. So before we get into the story and the mechanics of our game, I'd like to go through the genre and the platform. So the platform is going to be PC, and the reason as to why we chose PC is because our audience, we want to target a bigger audience, a more global audience. And we feel like a PC would be able to sort of advertise the game a little bit better. We also feel like games development, you can develop your own games instead of in console based. Our genre is going to be survival horror. Now the reason as to why we chose survival horror is because of our story. We've got a very unique story that plays off as a sort of mental state, but you'll learn more about this in future slides. The perspective is going to be 2D side-scrolling. This also links with our genre, but also with our budget. Since we're an indie game company, our budget is going to be very small, and so we couldn't go with the 3D sort of aspect in our game. So we're going with the 2D sort of style, and it kind of takes it away from immersion. But we're coming back with the story and making it really, truly the best storyline that we could possibly make. The gameplay mechanics is flashbacks. Now, the reason as to why we went with a very minimalistic sort of feature or mechanic, just to summarize the sort of game that we have, is because it's a very unique and sort of goes off with our story. It's story-driven, in other words. Similar games to ours, we chose This War of Mine and Deadlight, and the reason as to why we picked these is because of the graphics that it uses, so it's photorealistic, as you can see on the right, and also because it's 2D side-scrolling, and so we feel like it's got a really great connection with our game. The game style and the genre and age is going to be something that we're going to look further into when we're picking our target audience. And since we're in pre-production, we can't really make that decision right now. But once we have a sort of prototype after the pre-production, or in the middle stages of pre-production, we'll be able to identify which sort of audience we're actually going to target. The PEGI rating, we feel like it's best to go with 18 plus because we feel like our story and the game sort of flows with the sort of, it's very sort of, we need an audience that is mature about our story, and we don't want immature people or people who don't see our game as a true sort of psychological effect that could actually happen in real life. Our age range also links with PEGI rating. It's 18 to 36. We wanted to have a big range because we feel like we shouldn't just target a small range of people in our audience. Our selling platform is going to be Steam. Now, this does not mean we won't have our own website. In fact, we will have our own website, and we'll be able to sell a game through our website, merchandise, anything that we have about our game will be sold on our website. But we're using the Steam as a platform of advertisement, so we can have a new community join into our game and make it really stand out. The pre-production, that's our Gantt chart. We've got a Gantt chart in the table over there. If at the end you want to see it, you're welcome to. Basically, it says all the times that we'll spend on each sections on the pre-production. It also has it labeled where we have the names of each teammate, and you'll know exactly who's going to do which section.
Story. The main character will take two forms in the game, June Valentine and Little June Valentine. Throughout the game, flashbacks will be used to give insights into June's fears. Throughout the game, she will be constantly trying to conquer her fears, and these will be seen throughout the game. The game will include a variety of enemies throughout the game. The enemies will be fierce, for example, spiders and stuff. They will be the enemies within the game. The story is going to be very original and complex because it will deal with her mental states and what she believes to be the real world within her mind. It leaves cliffhangers and the target audience guessing. We're not looking to answer all the questions for the audience and leave some cliffhangers.
Okay, so to introduce the game world of Animus, basically it's split out into two sections. So one of them is the haunted house, and the other is the dark asylum. Now, we chose these environments because we felt that it fits really well with the horror genre, and like other games use this, such as Outlast, it uses Asylum. So and like it's easier to work with. Like it has like scare elements already in it. So you're probably wondering like what makes this unique though? Like the environment itself makes it unique. But what makes it unique is that the narrative is involved as well. The haunted house basically acts as like a past present, past tense, and the asylum acts as a present. That's where you play as Jean, and the haunted house you play as the younger version of her, as little Jean. Now, the way they both interact with each other is that the haunted house will act like a hub, basically, and that's where you learn like new abilities and even hints about why the enemies are there. So, for example, like little Jean, she goes down into the cave and she finds like a spider in it, and like she uses a torchlight to scare her away. Now, this gets transitioned into the main asylum. And that's where things will become tougher and less forgiving. As David clearly pointed out, the reason why we chose 2D perspective is because of budget. We wanted to go for a third person point of view, because a first person point of view, but because of tight budget, it doesn't really. And also, it actually it gives like a realistic effect as a first person. But we found out that there's still like horror games like Deadlight that use like a 2D perspective. So we just kind of evolved around that. It's kind of like Mario, for example. You can see here it's not just a one-way platformer. It's like two ways, so you've got like 11 and 12, and you can, we did this because it allows exploration. We can go into like, there's a unique idea that we've implemented into our game as well. It's basically the transitioning of the game. So for example, like say if you're over there and you're in the asylum, how would it transition to the haunted house? You'll see like lamps, carpets, and slowly these things will start to form instead of what you see from a normal asylum. And we did this because it's kind of like, it plays like a psychological trick on you, and that's what the game is evolved around. So that's the reason why we did it. And there's also traps within our game, and we included this because, like for example, bear traps on the floor. We included this because it makes the player like have to feel paranoid. They have to watch out when they step, otherwise. That's what makes it like a survival horror game, basically. This is the concept art for the asylum, so you can see it kind of like resembles it, with like windows, they're like dark corridors, and we took like dark elements and trying to put it together, but we made sure like we had these structures to make it look like an asylum, so it looks much more believable. And this is the concept art for the haunted house. Here you see the evil Jean that I'll explain later on in the slide. It resembles a house, like so you've got the curtains and you've got the light bulb, but we've also like made it in such a way that we add dark elements to it, and that's what it basically relates to the asylum as well.
So peripherals, we've got two basic peripherals that we want to use in our game. And now the reason as to why we want to use mouse and keyboard for our game is because it's a PC game. But this does not mean we don't want to give players the freedom to use any other peripheral. In fact, we will have controller support for our game, which will make it so the players can choose between a controller or a mouse and keyboard. And the reason as to why we want this is to give the player some basic sort of freedom where they can choose which peripheral to use. This will not give any advantages to people, so if you use a different peripheral than mouse and keyboard, then you'll still have the same features, the same controls and everything. It won't give any advantage to the player.
So basically, we chose manifested monsters is because the story, as David pointed out, it relates to like the drive of it's story driven basically, and it's about her defeating her own demons and her own phobias. So we thought that we kind of like manipulate this into like a dark version of the phobias because it would be more realistic if it relates to the story. We've also put the environment, going back into the game mode a bit, that it relates to the enemies. So, for example, it's a bit tailored. There's the haunted house and the asylum that are split up in 3 sections, and the bottom. So you'd have the bottom cave where the spiders are, the corridors where the monsters would be, and the attic of where the demons would be. We did this because we wanted it to like fit in with the environment. Basically, it makes it much more realistic and much more immersive if we do that. And it's also based on how much power they have. So the spirits have the most power, so it's going to be at the top. And the spiders got the least, it's going to be at the bottom. Example of some of the enemies that we have is spiders. I said again, monsters and demons. It's because basically these are common phobias for people, and that's what makes it much more realistic. I mean, if you had a pony as an enemy, it's not going to be really realistic, is it? Unless you're afraid of ponies. But that's what we went for, and that's what makes it realistic. So we've also got unique boss tactics. One, for example, is Evil Gene that you see right here. It's basically, that's the concept art for Gene, and this is the concept art for Evil Gene. It kind of contrasts it a bit. So for example, this has got black eyes, like when you're possessed, or like this, it's got red. Just use of semiotics just to make it a bit more scary. But going back on the unique boss tactics, to defeat Evil Gene, you've got to damage her in the haunted house. She cannot be damaged through the asylum. So to do this, you've got to get her into the haunted house. But to do this, you've got to have a torchlight flash on to the right gene. There's going to be multiple genes there. If you do manage to flash onto the right one, then you take her back into the haunted house and damage her. But if you don't, then your mental status bar will be activated and you'll be back, pretty much. Okay, so basically, our game flow, the way that our game story is designed, we went for more of a linear approach because we want the emphasis and focus to be around Gene, and that's what linear storylines do, and that's why you don't see many cross points off from one section. It just goes in one way. The game gets harder, and the reason why we've done this is because in survival games such as Outlast, you can choose the difficulty. Now, I'm scared of games like that, I'm going to admit, right? And I usually go on the easy settings, which is really bad, right? But we want to counter this because then it's not going to be that scary, it's easy. So we've decided to put in the game gets harder as the play progresses. This makes it much more realistic because the survival aspects, it's there. It tests your point. I mean, if you can prove that you're a good player and you can beat the game, then you've got your bragging rights. And for anyone that knows a game with a game called Dark Souls, you will know that it's got the same sort of mechanic, the same sort of progression in there. So that's how we know that it works. So what happens when you die? Well, basically the screen will go black, and it will slowly fade into a black screen, and it will basically indicate that she's basically lost her insanity. Now, we've done this because it's quite unique. It's instead of just a person dying on the floor and saying dead on the screen with blood, it's just adds that bit more uniqueness and makes it realistic because of that.
Interface. The game will use a simplistic interface to keep the focus on the game. The interface will be adjustable, so when you go in the menu you'll be able to drag and drop the different elements to change it to suit your liking. We're doing this to keep the clutter on the screen to a minimum and the full player's focus on the game. It's to make it easy to use for the target audience, and horror effects will be added rather than using visual sort of parts on the screen. So, for example, overlays like red blood when you die and stuff. The cutscenes are important to the game because it will help transition it, and because the game's 2D, the cutscenes will be doing most of the storytelling. There will be a cutscene at the start of the game introducing the players to the game and basically setting the scene for the game. After this, the cutscenes will be used to transition through the levels and tell the majority of the story, along with the gameplay.
So unfortunately we are down a teammate, so we can't cover their part, but we'll just carry on. So why from the game? Well, I was thinking more about this, and I feel like most games in the games industry use a very simplistic way of telling a story, which is basically going forward. Sort of learning about sort of maybe if it's hero's journey, maybe they'll learn about themselves and sort of grow on that. We want to be different, we want to be unique, and so we want to go backwards in time. For example, as you heard Raj say, our story is based around a girl who is in a mental state. And so we want to go back in time every level so that the player can understand why the player or the character got into that mental state. We will be implementing this, and we'll add a feature where the player can also get items from the past to help with the future. That way it's kind of like you're learning the story while sort of acquiring or achieving something. We've got other features that we are going to implement, but obviously the long-term memories, which I just explained, is what really will make our game unique. And I honestly feel like our game could be, the best game, the best-selling game of the year. With this unique feature, it will really stand out from the rest of the games. Thanks for listening, and do you have any questions?